Okay, so now let's talk about bipolar disorder. So there are two kinds, but first let's describe what does mania look like. So mania is an experience of dramatic and inappropriate rises in mood. Okay, so there are times if you look at your mood meter, kung baga, if you can imagine your mood meter, there are times that you really feel good, diba? But there are also, for those with bipolar disorder, the feeling good can exceed yung what we consider as normal na feeling good, to the point where based on these symptoms you see overall that that's very odd yung pinapakita nila, and that it can also be dangerous to themselves or to other people, and it's really just excessive. It usually gets them in trouble. So it's really not uncommon to see someone with a bipolar disorder get hospitalized for hurting him or herself, or for getting into a lot of trouble after the manic episode niya. Okay? So let's look at the symptoms. So for emotional symptoms, there's feeling of being active, powerful, in search of a particular outlet. So very high yung emotionality. And then for motivation, there's a need for constant excitement, involvement, and companionship. So sometimes they'll seek out a romantic or a sexual partner and have promiscuous sex, unprotected sex. So they're not worrying about safety, they're not worrying about concerns for like, oh, yung reputation ko, among other things. Okay? Or they might seek out like joining certain activities, pushing through with whatever plans they have, grand plans usually. Okay? So for behavioral symptoms, they're usually very active, so they move very quickly, they talk and talk and talk. And then sometimes there's flamboyance, so like they like to display what they've done, display what they have, and really make sure people see what they're doing. And then there are also cognitive symptoms involved, and that includes poor judgment, planning, and coherence. So it's really just like somebody na parang, it's like trompo, para siyang bagyo. Okay. Just ikot, dadaanan ka, and then like, oh, what just happened? And then a lot of damage along the way. So poor judgment. So for example, somebody could have a manic episode and just decide like, oh, I'm gonna take out all my savings and I'm gonna build a particular structure. I'm gonna donate this somewhere. Here, I'm gonna set up a business. So there's no planning about it, just doing it within the span of the manic episode. And then another one is that sometimes they're not in touch with reality, so that's why the decisions that they make are also poor. And of course, the physical symptoms involve a very high level of energy. So sometimes they will not sleep for days on end throughout the manic episode. Okay, and that's also another one where after that they're just really down. Okay, but throughout the episode they just go on and on and on and on. Okay? So you can imagine what that looks like. Okay? So for a manic episode, for you to be able to say that a person has had a manic episode, so for 1 week or longer, so 7 days or longer, there's abnormally and persistently elevated, expansive, or irritable mood, and an increased activity or energy for most of the day, nearly every day. So for example, one case is a guy who during his manic episode decided, I'm gonna redo my home. And what he did was he bought paint, lots and lots of paint, and then he started painting his whole house day in and day out. Even at night, he wasn't sleeping, he wasn't resting, he was just going at it. Okay, so after his house was multicolored and he had used up his money, and then he had like, what happened, he didn't eat, he was just all over task. It was a goal-directed task that he just had to do. Okay, so lots of activity. So there's presence of at least three of the following. So one is inflated self-esteem. So they may say, "Oh, I'm like this. I'm gonna save the world. I'm gonna protect people from whatever." There was also one case I read about a woman who said that she's gonna buy sort of like the antidote for a particular snake poison. So she kind of did research on where to find them and then bought a lot of that for her city or town. I'm not sure what that was, but basically, like, she thought that she was gonna save everybody from snake venom. Next, there is a decreased need for sleep, as you've already have heard, and there's increased talkativeness or pressure to keep talking. So when you're listening to someone with a manic episode, it can be tiring because they go on and on and on, and sometimes it's hard to follow their train of thought because sometimes they can also jump from talking about one thing to another, but they just go on and on. So sometimes you'd mistake that for a psychotic symptom, maybe possibly disorganized speech and thinking. Diba? And then flight of ideas or the experiences that thoughts are racing. So this is related to the other one, so that's why they need to keep getting at it, just expressing and expressing their thoughts. And then the other one is distractibility. And so what they're doing is they're doing something and then they're like, "Oh, I remember something," and then they like jump at it. And there is an increase in goal-directed behavior or psychomotor agitations. As you know, these people pursue a lot of activity, so possibly a business, a trip, or sexual activities, or just anything that they can get their hands on, depending on what they perceive to be of interest to them. And then there's excessive involvement in activities that have a high potential for painful consequences. The painful consequence being personal, romantic, financial, or economic, or in terms of their work. And of course, there's a significant distress or impairment. So they'll tell you, "I've been having a very difficult life because like every time the manic episode ends, I just end up in a wreck." Or maybe there's impairment, like they get themselves into trouble with the authorities or maybe with their work. They just disappear from work for days at a time, or from school. And in their social life, they just can't keep relationships very easily because they have episodes like that. So those are manifestations of a manic episode. So here you have three kinds of diagnosis that you can give for a bipolar disorder. The first is bipolar 1. So for you to make a diagnosis of bipolar 1, there should be a manic episode or a recurrent episode of a hypomanic or depressive episode, but you know that there is a history of a manic episode in the past. And then of course there's significant distress or impairment. Okay? Or if you look at the person's did you hear Shopee? It's 10:10 today, so yeah. If you assess the history of the patient and then you see that the person has not had a manic episode in any of the histories told by the patient or the patient's family, you can check for maybe bipolar 2. Has the person had a hypomanic episode? So first, there is a presence or history of a major depressive episode, and then a hypomanic episode. So going down on the mood meter and then slightly high up. So very active, also very preoccupied with particular activities, but not as intense and not as long as a manic episode. So remember, for a manic episode, you need 1 week or more. The person should have experienced the episode for that long. For hypomania or hypomanic episode, it's just about 4 days. 4 days na hindi gaanong as intense as a manic episode. So also, there should be no history of a manic ep. If there is a history of a manic ep, kahit yung nai-experience niyo right now is a hypomanic ep, then automatically it goes into the bipolar 1 category. Okay, so hindi na yon hypomanic. And then there is significant distress or impairment. But if you consider also the impairment here is not as severe as that of bipolar 1 disorder. Okay, so sa bipolar 1, it's really usually something that is bothersome. Sa hypomanic, it can be just a minor thing, like nagkakaroon siya ng problems kasi like he or she has to be absent for days at a time at work because grabe naubos yung energy niya during the hypomanic episode because he or she has been working for days on end. So medyo merong certain level of productivity that you can exhibit pag may hypomanic episode. But you also have to watch out for that because sometimes a bipolar 2 diagnosis can eventually turn into a bipolar 1 diagnosis. Okay, so nag-elevate from a hypomanic to a manic na state. And then the other one is the cyclothemic disorder. And this is equivalent to the persistent depressive disorder sa unipolar depression. So, kung yung persistent depressive disorder or dysthymia is mild depression, this one is mild bipolar symptoms pero in a longer span of time. So, merong experience of numerous episodes of hypomania and mild depressive symptoms spread out within a span of 2 years or more. Or for children and adolescents, you need 1 year. Okay, and in between the episodes, the hypomanic and the depressive episodes within a 2-year span, there are periods of normal mood. Okay, so yeah. So learn to differentiate the three because that'll help a lot when you do differential diagnosis.